I warmly welcome you to the ATMI Network of Policy Advisors and Analysts, or NEPA webinar series. So I'm Girly Tatlonghari. I'm the program head of the Research and Thought Leadership Department of CIRCA, and I will be your moderator for today's webinar entitled India's Growing Rice Surplus, a Strategic Opportunity for Southeast Asian Import Diversification. We are very pleased to have policymakers, researchers, development practitioners, and private sectors with us today. So your presence reflects the growing interest in regional food security, resilient trade arrangements, and evidence-based policy dialogue, which are precisely the objectives of this webinar series. So before introducing our speakers, allow me to briefly situate today's webinars with the broader work of the Network of Policy Advisors and Analysts, or NEPA. So the NEPA was conceptualized as sustainability mechanism following the completion of the ATMI ASEAN project, or the Agricultural Transformation and Market Integration, or ATMI, which generated a substantial body of research, analytical tools, and capacity strengthening outputs. So NEPA was established as a regional platform that brings together policy advisors, analysts, and researchers, and development partners. So this is to sustain the dissemination and uptake of the research findings, and to strengthen policy analysis and advisory capacities, and of course, foster continuous dialogue on agri-food system transformation in the ASEAN and the neighboring regions.
Dr. Gori, sorry
Yes.
to interrupt. Could you please turn your camera on? We'll be able to see you then.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't see that I was cannot control my. Okay, there you go. Sorry about that. In terms of the work of NEPA, we provide evidence-based empirical policy analysis to support the cooperative solutions and among the member states. We also like to disseminate research and capacity strengthening output from the ASEAN, ATMI ASEAN, and the related initiatives. And now we are in our ATMI 2, our phase 2 of this project, and facilitate knowledge sharing and policy dialogue among governments, research institutions, civil societies, farmers' organization, and the private sector. It will also serve as a venue for presenting and discussing national and regional policy studies, and promote wider engagement through annual forums and thematic webinars, and develop communication and outreach products to ensure the evidence-informed decision-making. So today's webinar is a concrete example on how NEPA seeks to bridge research and policy, particularly on strategic issues affecting food security and trade in Southeast Asia. So the focus of today's discussion, which is in India's growing rice surplus and implication for Southeast Asian import diversification, is a timely and highly strategic. India has recorded consecutive years of record rice production, resulting in substantial and persistent surpluses at both national and subnational levels. At the same time, several Southeast Asian countries, including the Philippines, Indonesia, and Malaysia, are facing increasing supply constraints due to declining rice acreage, stagnant yield growth, climate-related risks, and policy-driven imports timing and sourcing challenges. So this presentation will examine how these contrasting dynamics create a new trade ecosystems opportunity. So we are very much fortunate to have our speaker for today. So let me briefly introduce our speaker. Dr. Sam Mohanty is a globally recognized agriculture economist. with more than 30 years of experience on leadership in global agriculture policy markets and research. So he previously served as the Asia's regional director at the International Potato Center and as principal scientist at IRI alongside academic roles in the United States. So she's a recognized authority on rice and cotton markets. He has advised governments worldwide and contributed to major policy reforms, including the Vietnam rice sector strategy. So Dr. Mohanty holds a PhD from the University of Nebraska, Lincoln, and has received multiple international awards, including the World Rice Industry Global Service Award, and has been recognized as a top agri-food pioneer. And I would also like to introduce Dr. Rogelio Briones. He will serve as our discussant. We will hear from him actions and insights from Dr. Briones, and he is currently the Senior Research Fellow at the Philippine Institute for Development Studies, specializing in agriculture policy, rural development, food security, and international trade. He has authored numerous research publications and co-edited 5 books, including an award-winning volume on irrigation policy recognized by the National Academy of Science and Technology in 2022 here in the Philippines. So, Dr. Briones had advised governments across Southeast Asia and served on several professional boards. He holds a PhD from the UP School of Economics and previously taught at Ateneo de Manila University and the University of the Philippines, Los Baños. So now I would like to give the floor to our presenter, Dr. Mohanty. You have 30
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Gurli. Should I go ahead?
Yes.
Let me share my slide. You can see my slide now?
Not yet.
We can see your slide, yes.
Okay, you can see now. Good.
Okay.
Anyway, thank you, Gurli, and good afternoon, everybody. People mostly from India and the Philippines here. First of all, let me thank NEPA, IFPRI, and CRCA for organizing this webinar and giving me the opportunity to speak to you. So the title of what I'll be talking about is very timely topic. What I'll be talking mostly is India's growing rice surplus and its strategic opportunities for Southeast Asian rice import diversification there. This is my brief outline of the presentation here. I'll first touch base on Indian rice situation, what is happening in the rice situation, both productions, rising surplus, and how the procurement and the MSP works in India. Whereas there is very limited capacity for the domestic demand to absorb all these surpluses there. Then I'll give an example of Telangana, where I've been working for last 1 year to manage this rice surplus happening in the state. Then I'll move on to the Southeast Asia, talk about the supply demand situation there and what is happening in the production side, why the production is declining, and some of the policy driven import constraints and import timings of the region there. So then I kind of bring both the regions together. India is a rice surplus and Southeast Asia is a rice deficit. It's like a match made in heaven. So can we bring some of the surplus rice growing Indian states? I'm not talking country, states with growing deficit in the Southeast Asian importing country. I'll talk about that matchmaking in heaven. Then I'll basically conclude saying that this is a very feasible options. These G2G frameworks with the Southeast Asia importers, sub-national to national, is a very viable options in terms of food security for the region and also managing surpluses, growing surplus in India, which can actually reduce the volatility and make the trade policy more predictable. And also what it can lead to is that more important is the private sector participations and more contract-based exports between the subcontinent here and some of the Southeast Asian rice importing countries there. So let me start with the Indian situation here. I'm just telling you the India is on a roll. It's a 10th consecutive year of record crops. And in the last 2 years alone, Indian production has increased by 25 million ton. From 135, it's going to reach close to 160 in 2025 and 26 there. I call it some way because of the expansion of the irrigations infrastructure. India has some way to respect monsoon-proofed rice production. I'm not talking 100% irrigated, but where it matters, it's mostly 100% irrigation backup is there. So the drought has very minimal effect on Indian rice production, what we have seen in the past decades. We have a few bad monsoon year 22, 23 and 23, 24. And India, despite having those bad monsoon, India ended up producing record production there. And for the last 2 years, you have seen what has happened to production level there. Mostly this increase in production is coming from the acreage there. Not we are not looking at huge expansion or the growth or jump in the yield. It's mostly more than 70-80% increase in production can be attributed to acreage. I think 10 years ago when I was at IRI, we used to say India, the max is around 40 and mid 40s is the maximum rice acreage India can have. But now India is getting close to early 50s. So the most recent is 52 million hectares. So Indian rice acreage has increased significantly, driven by the policy. Some of the policy things, support prices, bonuses given by the states, several state governments. Rice has become very attractive crops for the farmers there in many states. So that's part of the reason why the acreage is growing in many Indian states there. So what has happened is the demand side is very limited growth there. If you look at Indian demand, the 90 million ton, I would say the consumption, food consumption, half of them through the public distribution system, 45 million, half of them in the open market sales there. So that the total food demand is 90 million ton. Then what India is producing right now is close to 160 million ton, which will be the expected production this year. So we are looking at 50 million tons of surplus, but then you take out the feed use, ethanol use, seed use, then some of the post-harvest losses. We are looking at right now 30 million tons of surplus India is having on a yearly basis. And if you look at if the policy continues, one can safely say the production is going to continue to rise. Demand growth is most of the food demand is stagnant. India may increase some of the ethanol use of rice, but still Indian surplus is likely going to grow in the coming decade as long as the policy remains intact, which everybody thinks it's very difficult for the Indian policymakers to dislodge the support program, MSP program they have right now. This is just an example of what is happening in Indian domestic policy and the export dynamism there. So if you look at the MSPs, the minimum support price, guaranteed price, the government announces, which is around that purple line, there's 23,000 rupees per metric tons. That translates into 255 USD. Then if you convert that to mill rice, that becomes 35,000, which is $387. That's the mill rice equivalent. If you add some additional 5 rupees per kg as the operation, management, procurement, that becomes $442. So that is the cost of rice in India in the government procurement system there. But what happens is India, half of the rice, 45 million ton, India gives literally to the below poverty line, which is the PDS rice with public distribution systems, where the rice is basically distributed to nearly 800 million people between 0 and 3 rupees, with 0 to 3,000 rupees per metric ton. Literally, it's given free to the farmers there, to the consumers there. Then on the top line, there's a blue line there, which is the one Food Corporation of India procures this rice. They also try to get rid of some of the rice after the PDS rice there. That is set at right now $310 per metric ton, which is below the world price there. So my point is that the amount of rice going into the government storage, which has a procurement cost of $440, whereas the world price right now, it falls around 330, 340 there. If the state wants to get rid of some of the rice, they have to basically sell it at a loss, you know. So for the sale, for the state to sell it, to export it, it's mostly loss minimization rather than anything else. If you keep it for next 1 or 2 years, your rice quality will deteriorate and the value will go down. So it's a very catch 22 question for states what to do with rice, the surplus rice, how long they would like to keep it. This is where we come in and talk about the Southeast Asia there. So this is the graph which says that India's the food corporation, the procurement amount is close to 50 million ton right now there. It's like a historical high right now. But the next graph, if you see, look at the blue line there, that's the November FCI stocks, which used to be in the decade ago, 2015, it used to be 10 million ton. Now November stock is more than 30 million ton. That will give you idea what is happening to Indian production and the growing surplus at the national level there. This is the state-wise the rice production there in 23-24. If you can see the production, if you look at across India there, many Indian states right now are rice surplus states, which used to be not the case maybe 10-15 years ago. Let's take example of Odisha. The eastern state of Odisha used to be a deficit. Now they are one of the more fastest growing surplus states. Partly because of policy driven, the new government came in, they provided bonus on top of this MSP, minimum support price. So rice is becoming very attractive for the farmers there. And many other central part of India, Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, used to be the rice deficit. Now they are producing more and more rice there. In, Before we used to see only Punjab, Haryana and few other states as the surplus states. Now we are seeing many other eastern, southern and the central states are becoming rice surplus states after meeting their own requirement and also giving their commitment to the central government for the PDS rice. So after fulfilling all their requirement, they're left with more and more rice, over the years there. So because of this surplus, India has emerged as the largest exporter of rice. There is nothing, everybody knows that. India now accounts for 40 million tons, 40% of the market share, around 22, 25, 23 million tons of rice they are exporting there. And if you look at where they export, America, EU, FSU and the Middle East, that's mostly basmati rice. Let's not talk about that. The non-basmati rice, which could be parboiled or the raw rice, that primarily goes to Africa and Asia there. So Africa is primarily parboiled rice. Asia is mostly the Southeast Asia is the raw milk and the South Asia is parboiled rice there. But if you look at the ASEAN numbers, around 2.5 million tons, most of them goes to its neighboring countries, Bangladesh, Nepal and Sri Lanka there. So, and also broken rice goes to China. So the Southeast Asia is not a major destination of Indian rice so far. So very little amount of rice goes to Southeast Asia, some to Singapore and Malaysia, and very little to Philippines, and very little to Indonesia and other Southeast Asian countries there. So if you look at on the flip side, Southeast Asia, so we have bunch of exporters there, Vietnam, Thailand, Myanmar, Cambodia, also some of the major importers there. So it's a region which actually houses bunch of exporters and some of the major importers, Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia. There are three large importers in the world. Philippines been top importers for the last couple of years, and it's expected it's going to continue to remain in the next 2026 and even beyond there. And these three importers, Philippines, Indonesia, and Malaysia, they accounted 11.7 million metric ton in 2024. Out of 60 million ton, these three importers imported nearly 12 million tons of rice. On average, they're importing 8 to 10 million tons of rice annually there. Primarily, they consume long grain rice with kernel length of 6 mm or higher. And when it cooked, they would like to have a soft and the glossy white. That's the consumer preference of rice in this region there. So most preferred rice, in the Philippines, particularly largest importer, is called DT8. I call DT8 is basically a designer rice. You don't see a lot of chalky, you don't see a lot of broken rice. It's very glossy and looks very good. And when it's cooked, it's a fragrant rice and also soft and the sweet taste they are there. So Filipinos are kind of addicted to this DT8 type of rice in the last decade or so. So closest what we got in India is IR64 or the equivalent is MTU 1010, which is very close to what DT8, but it is a non-fragrant rice there, not fragrant rice like DT8 there. Just look at quickly on the Southeast Asia side. Literally, all the importing and exporting country production is declining. This is Indonesia rice situation. Your blue line is the production, which has been declining for last decade or so. So following the production, the consumption is also declining. So they are still a deficit country. Production decline is happening at a faster rate than the consumption decline there. So if you see clearly here, both the area and the yield both are on the declining trend there in Indonesia there. So their imports have been very erratic. They enter the market and they import significant amount some year, then they disappear for a couple of years. That's been the normal trend of Indonesia. Very difficult to predict when they will import. Sometimes they will import at high prices, and when the price is low, they are out of the market because there's too much rice they bought at very high prices there. Example is 2024. They imported nearly 5 million ton, very high prices, and they are disappearing for 25. They are completely gone. Even they are also expected to be out by 2026 because they have the stocks there and the production has recovered all these things there. Mostly, if you look at the source which I am interested, it's primarily Indonesia, it's Vietnam and Thailand. They dominate the market. India had some years, India has some shares, but primarily it's Vietnam and Thailand. They're exporting their raw rice, milled rice to Indonesia there. Malaysia, very similar things. Vietnam and Thailand dominate the market. There are some rice goes from India, primarily to the Indian origin people. It's a short grain parboiled rice, mostly for the rice product called Italy there. It's called pony rice from India. Not lot of raw rice from India is exported to Malaysia there. It's mostly the parboiled which is exported to Malaysia there. Coming to the Philippines, so you see there is a growing spread between production and consumption. Consumption is growing at a very rapid pace still. Both per capita disappearance and the population goes driving the consumption there. And whereas the production is mostly flat. If you look at last nearly 8 to 9, 10, more than 10 years, production has been flat at 12 million metric ton. Whereas the consumption is increasing. That's the reason you see the growing, the imports by the Philippines from the global market, and they are now the largest importer of rice in the world there. So if you look at the acreage and yield, acreage has kind of flattened for the last several, probably more than decade. And more importantly, the yield also has flattened in Philippines for the last 6-7 years there. So we are looking at both all these importing countries where the acreage is either declining or acreage is flat, yield is declining or flat there. So the scope for production increase in these importing countries very, very slim, I would say, including the Malaysia there. But if you look at the export side, so Philippines has emerged as the largest importer of rice because of the growing spread between the production and the consumption that was expected. But the more importantly, what I would like to point is that Philippines importing more rice, but they're also importing high quality rice. If you look at the line there, that's the low quality imports we used to be very high before the tarification. After the tarifications, there are imports of fragrant rice from Vietnam, which is the DT8 I mentioned. That is actually account for the majority of their imports. So you can see the change in the consumption pattern among the Filipino consumers. They're preferring this more high quality fragrant and high quality non-fragrant white rice. The low quality white rice demand is mostly flat as 1 million ton out of the 5 million ton, and 3 to 4 million ton they're importing the very high quality fragrant rice primarily from Vietnam there. So this is also very important. When you look at the source of their imports, it's primarily Vietnam. More than 80% of their imports coming from Vietnam, and it's primarily the DT8 and there's a non-fragrant OM5414, I think. So those are the two account for majority of the imports from the Vietnam there. Thailand is the second highest, but you can see their share versus Vietnam there and Pakistan and others there. India has no share in Philippines market. So we are looking at the largest importer and not buying anything for the largest exporter there. So this is where I'm getting to in my next few slides there. So if you look at the Vietnam, just exactly mirror image of Vietnam exports. Vietnam is exporting most of its, for nearly 40% of its rice to Philippines and mostly high quality rice. And that is reflected in Vietnam rice exports in the past decades had gone from the low quality to most of them very high quality. And those high quality rice going to Philippines at a much higher price than the normal raw milled rice there. Just looking at the supply side on these exporters, more importantly, Vietnam also the acreage is declining for the last decade or so, and the yield is also flat. So the rice acreage in all the Southeast Asian country, Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, and if you look at this is the rice production, consumption, and in the Vietnam, you can see the difference, the surplus is declining in Vietnam in the last, I would say, last 10 years, the production has been declining, consumption has been flat, but they have still been able to manage to export around 7-8 million tons of rice there. The reason they have been able to export despite their shrinking production is because they are also importer of rice and paddy. They import significant amount of paddy from Cambodia. It can range between 4 to 5 million tons of milled rice equivalent of paddy, which basically come to the cross-border trade between Vietnam and Cambodia. And they also import the low quality, the Swarna raw rice from India. So what they do is they import paddy from Cambodia, re-mill it and re-export it. They import cheap rice from India. They use it for the noodles and they export their own high quality rice to overseas there. So they are very, very unique business model they have developed in terms of rice. Although they are not producing enough, they are importing and doing the value addition and exporting to Philippines and other countries there. Similarly, Thai also exactly same thing. The acreage is actually flat or declining, and the yield is also flat in the last 10 years there. So across all these countries, you saw both exports and the importing countries there. The scope for production increase in rice from both from the Thailand, Vietnam, and also importing countries are very slim. And actually, many places the rice production has been declining now for a while now, and nobody expects that trend to change it, to reverse it. Only two countries in the region where the production can increase is Cambodia, and I have Cambodia here. You can see there's a increase in acreage in Cambodia there. Cambodia and Myanmar. Cambodia can increase, but the logistically is a landlocked place, so it's difficult for them to export. So most of them actually exported as a paddy from Vietnam and getting milled and re-exported back into other countries there. And Myanmar, they also have the potential, but looking at their situation there, it's very difficult to say when Myanmar will fix everything and try to start exporting a lot of rice there. So it's very, very low prospect of Myanmar becoming a large exporter anytime soon there. So we are looking overall, the production is declining, consumption is kind of flat, and these countries needs to import more and more in going forward there. This is where I want to talk about is that we have a situation in India, many rice growing states becoming surplus producers, and they expect to produce more and more rice given the policy setting we have right now. Nobody expects Indian rice production to go down because of the attractiveness of India from the farmer perspective. The MSP and the additional bonus given by several states, the rice is very attractive to the farmers there. So this is, since I lived in Philippines, I knew the situation. Now I'm living in India. So I'm kind of doing the matchmaking between surplus states and the deficit countries there. So we started with Telangana, where the last year we started with Telangana and tried to matchmake with Philippines there. Telangana has emerged as one of the largest producer of rice. If you look at Telangana rice production acreage, the acreage has tripled in the last 10 years. And you can see the acreage has gone from 1.68 to nearly 4.69 million hectares. And more than 90%, 96% is irrigated. And so they grow half of their crops in the Rabi seasons, dry seasons there, because the irrigation infrastructure is there. So they actually produce 17 million tons of milled rice in 23-24 and became the top producer in the country. If you look at the requirement, here are the requirements. They produce 17 million ton, and the largest area is MTU 10 and IR64. This has implication because this is the rice which is actually can be consumed by the Southeast Asian consumers, particularly Filipinos and Indonesia there, because of their cooking traits there. So their requirement is 4 million metric ton for their own populations. They contribute to the central pool with the central government around 6.5. So they are still left with 3 to 4 million tons of rice annually now. So either they can plead to the central government to take the surplus, or the surplus remains in the warehouse and gets deteriorated over time there. So we started this process of matching the Telangana with the Philippines. And after a lot of negotiation between Telangana and Philippines, Telangana is the Telangana Civil Supply Corporation. Philippines is the plants producting, which is the one of the agency controlled by the government. And they came to an agreement and they had a MOU. They signed a MOU to supply 800,000 metric tons of rice paddy annually. It's not that we have reached there, but there are a couple of vessels have already gone to Philippines in the last few months before the Philippines put a ban in September. So we are probably next vessel will be going in January there. So after this, the Telangana rice, which is IR64 MTU 1010, it has reached Philippines. It has been sold in the Philippines market. So this is some of the situation. This is the Telangana rice. Basically, it's a long grain around 6 mm. It is not anywhere close to DT8 in sort of fragrant. It's a non-fragrant rice. And it is somewhere between DT8 and OM5451, which are two of the major varieties imported by Philippines from Vietnam there. But the key is that this Telangana rice is much, much cheaper than the DT8. It will probably cheaper than the OM5451. Okay, so you can see the grain quality here is a glossy. It took some time for us to convince the Telangana millers to produce this quality of rice there, but they can produce it if there is a demand there. Okay, so let me. Okay, so we have done extensive testing with Filipino officials and other stakeholders after the Telangana rice went there. I think good news is that they always confuse with Telangana with Vietnam. They don't think India can supply this quality of rice because it has not happened in the last 10-15 years. Indian rice, last Indian consignment went in 2008-9 and it was bad. Since then, basically they didn't trust the Indian traders who can mix up this low quality rice and send it to Philippines. So this is the first time the Indian rice, Telangana rice went there, and it was well liked by the consumers there. So you can see this is the yellow bags are the Telangana rice. You can see clearly it's visible in the retail outlets there. And the Telangana rice also were redistributed as a relief measures in Cebu after the typhoon there. But the thing is, what I found out is that the retailers, they're basically removing this Telangana rice from this bag and put it in jasmine or one other rice, I forgot the name, some pandon rice. So some of the popular rice bags they actually take this rice and repack in their popular bags and selling it in the retail market there. Just because people are used to those type of rice and they are not used to the Telangana rice. And this rice is selling and they all sold out very quickly. The two vessels went late last year, mid last year, before the ban. It actually sold out very quickly, and it was much cheaper than other imported rice. And people really like the taste of the Telangana rice in the Philippines there. So what we are doing right now is because of the supply chain is not geared up for producing or exporting to the market like Philippines. Philippines is a premium market. and Indian millers, they're not used to producing this high quality rice in the sense silky, sortex, very low percentage of chaffy grain, very less broken there. So what we are doing right now is basically doing the backward linkages and trying to produce rice, exclusively for the export purpose there. It is not government undertaking; it's a government supported, but the private partners are participating, the millers and other people are participating to be part of the system there. So it starts from the seed to sip there. So we basically have a cluster of 100 to 200 hectares, and we give them give them access to the quality seeds, and lower the mechanization cost because of clusters, and try to minimize the fertilizer pesticide use, try to grow sustainably. I believe when you have a SEO demand there, it's very easier to convince farmers to practice sustainable practices there. Either direct seeded rice or AWD, or any of these sustainable low methane rice, I would say there. So we are trying to pilot this particular 1 lakh hectares, 100,000 hectares of integrated rice supply chain in Telangana, which is directed towards the Philippines market particularly, and grow the type of the rice they like, and mill the type of the rice they like, then try to target the Philippines market there. It could be G2G, it could be also P2P, private to private, between Philippines and the Telangana there. So the G2G could be a question mark. Why you are doing G2G? That is not, not basically against the WTO the regulations there. But what I look at as G2G as a catalyst for private trade relationship. Since the Telangana rice went to Philippines and it was liked by the Filipino consumers, there are trade delegation went, private trade delegations. There are many private players now trying to penetrate that particular market there, trying to convince the Filipino buyers or the traders that we can supply the quality of rice equivalent to what you have seen in Telangana there. So we are seeing a lot more activity from the private players to penetrate Filipino market there. Apart from G2G, you could have a G2P or P2P, more so happening between Telangana and the Philippines there. And this could be repeated with Indonesia and the Malaysia. So we are seeing a lot more greater interest from the Filipino importers and institutional buyers towards India. And as you know, the Philippines government also trying to diversify their source. They really don't want to import 85% of the rice from one country where the production is declining. They would like to also diversify to include India, Pakistan, Cambodia, Myanmar, and some of the exporting countries there, to minimize their risk side. So an Indian situation, the supply situation, the surplus situation in many rice growing states could be one of the way to diversify Philippines supply sources there, export sources, to minimize the risk there. So let me see whether, yeah, I think I'm close to 30 minutes there. Let me conclude by saying that following the Telangana model, the several rice producing surplus Indian states are now pursuing structured trade arrangement with importing countries. Now I am working with a few other states. I cannot name it now. We are not targeting only Philippines. We are targeting Indonesia, Malaysia, even parabolic rice to some of the African countries, South Africa, Nigeria, other things there. Initially, it could be a G2G, but the G2G could open up the market for the private players there. The quality perception for Indian rice could change with the participation of the government there, just like it happened in Philippines. And Philippines would have bought from the private players. It's the Telangana government who gave them the assurance that the quality will be good. This is what made this trade happen there. And so it gave the assured export markets, this assured export market also encouraging for the states to develop integrated supply chain the way I mentioned in Telangana. So it is also good for the states because this rice can be grown in a very integrated supply chain, very sustainable manner, and does not have to go through the MSP, the procurement. So that is also less burden for the states. If they can produce and export it without getting into the warehouse there. So that's a less burden also for them there. And at the same time, it is good for the importing country like Philippines. They also get a very steady supply and good quality rice at a very affordable price from India, from different states there. So the declining acreage and the stagnant yields are becoming a supply uncertainty, particularly in Southeast Asia exporting country for the importers there. So diversifying to include some of the Indian states, which probably works very well from Philippines perspective, from other importers perspective there. So this long-term partnership between Indian states and the importing country can strengthen the food security and also stabilize the market the way I look at it. This particular approach is a win-win. It's a very stable outlet for Indian surplus and very reliable supply for Southeast Asia importers. Only one hiccup here is that the India also rice is a food security crop. Just like India put a export ban in 2024 and remained out of the market for 1 year, that is one of the uncertainty of depending from India there in the future. But remember that the export ban India imposed last year was not because there was shortage of rice, because there was a shortage of wheat. Because during the Ukraine war broke out, they exported too much wheat. Then they had a bad wheat crop, so they had to ban the rice so that they have, because rice and wheat substitute in the PDS system. So they wanted to make sure there's enough grains in the domestic sector there. Uh, Considering the fact that India some way has monsoon to the rice and the production is way beyond the consumption now, it's very unlikely India will put any sort of export ban in the going forward unless there is a completely disaster situation in India where they cannot the production went declined by 30% you may see that. But if there is slight decline in the production, India has enough surplus to manage, and very unlikely they will put any sort of export ban there. So I look at it as India's very stable supply of rice to the region there. If we can work out some of this sub-national to national deal, either between G2G or G2P or P2P, it can actually work better for both parties there. With that, let me stop and give my mic to our discussant there.
Okay, so thank you so much, Dr. Mohanty, for your comprehensive and insightful presentation. So I now invite Dr. Ruel Briones to share his reflections, reactions, and policy insights about the presentation.
Thanks, Girly, and thanks to the organizers for this opportunity. Allow me to share some slides. I hope you'll be able to see them by now. Are they visible now?
Yes.
Yes, they are visible.
Okay, excellent. So it's always a pleasure to follow and be a discussant for Sam's talks. No, they're as usual very informative, very incisive. Although of course with time constraint, not everything can be explained. So I actually am serving more of an audience surrogate here and asking some more clarificatory or follow-up questions. Plus, maybe a few comments based on my own observations. So I think this rise of India as the world's top exporter, as Sam has highlighted, I think this is the biggest news in the world rice market over the past decade. Second biggest news is the emergence of Philippines as a top rice importer, thanks to its change in policy. And I think, Sam, well, I framed this based on the slideshow, but then now that I've heard the explanation, it seems pretty clear that conjunction of technology investment and especially policy was a driver of this emergence of India as the world's top rice exporter. Especially even though he mentioned irrigation because of the increase in acreage, even that irrigation seems to have been driven by policy, in addition to the price support. Although I would also like to pose the question, why some states like Telangana did better than others? Was there some geographic endowment, or was there some additional advantage from policy that was realized by certain states compared with other states. Incidentally, no, listening to the system, the rather heavily interventionist system in India, not less interventionist than what we have in Philippines, well, at least before the tarification. It struck me, 3,000 rupiah per ton. So just doing some rough calculation, that's practically giving away rice, right? 2 pesos per kilogram equivalent. So for the Filipinos there, that's 2 pesos per kilogram equivalent.
Correct.
I always keep telling people, if you made the consumer of India pay Filipino rice prices, they would overthrow any government. Philippines poor are very, very patient. It's like, imagine if you Indians in the audience, if you ask the Indians to pay 60 rupiah per kg, what would happen? Probably rioting in the streets. Yet, Filipinos are very peaceful, right? It all depends on your reference point. Anyway, so it seems that the direction of trade of the exports seem to me to be following some geographic patterns. So as Sam already pointed out in his slides, the direction of trade largely has been preoccupied with exports to Africa, predominantly Africa and the Middle East, less so for the rest of Asia, especially Southeast Asia, especially for Philippines. And I also compiled similar data. Sam has shown us that these are the value of rice imports, all of rice imports done by ASEAN countries. This includes intra-ASEAN trade, by the way. And if you look at the orange bar, that is the amount of India from that total, it was pretty low. And it remains low, actually, even though percentage change, it has grown dramatically. As a percentage of the total, it's still quite small, less than $500,000 versus the close to $6 billion worth of imports into ASEAN. And I think there's a very simple reason for this, no? There you go. It's the simple shipping lanes, no, and logistics. So if you look at a map that I grabbed off from Bloomberg website, here are the major ports of origin, at least the emerging container shipping routes, and the country to country routes are basically there in Africa. And of course, not drawn here, but you can easily guess that there's also significant shipping routes going up to the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Iran, etc. So the trade is facing that side. Meanwhile, to reach, okay, so you can reach Asia fairly easily, perhaps through Myanmar. Of course, South Asia is fairly accessible from India. But when you look at Southeast Asia, it's a different story, right? So either you go indirectly, as Sam has described, through Vietnam, and actually it ends up probably as Vietnam exports. You have to thread the needle of the Strait of Malacca and then go up to enter the what we call the West Philippine Sea. Now, of course, a little bit more accessible to India is Malaysia, Thailand, and Indonesia. Well, Thailand already has its own large rice production. So that explains why among Southeast Asia, it's Malaysia and Indonesia that tend to be the larger importers from India. So you have to really thread that needle in order to be able to reach to Philippines, which is why share of India in Philippine imports is still quite low, despite the powerhouse performance of India overall in the global export market. So I just want to conclude with a few final closing questions and thoughts. Sam is quite optimistic about the actual potential of expanding rice trade between India and Southeast Asia. Although in view of this geographic hurdles, I'm wondering whether there are any logistical improvements that might still be needed in order for that potential to be properly realized. Um, he mentioned the Telangana and Philippines bilateral agreement, but I'm wondering what are the details of the institutional modalities. I saw something about Telangana Civil Corporation. Is that like a state level owned enterprise making deals with Philippines, and who is the counterpart in Philippines? I know it cannot be NFA because National Food Authority no longer has the authority to import. Perhaps it's private entities or government entity or a consortium. It'll be nice to know the details, because moving forward, these are the institutional modalities. G2G, I'm not really that bothered with G2G, especially since probably that a large amount of the surplus is actually in India's side, at least, is probably with G, right? With government, because probably will that unable to offload all of its stocks that it has purchased because of a very high minimum support price. So
Yeah,
at least initially, a lot of the stocks that can be offered at cut rate prices will probably from government stocks. But then, of course, that cannot be the permanent long-term arrangement. Eventually, Filipino importers will also need to develop contacts with private sector exporters from India, and so the more long-term sustainable trade linkages will be formed with that. No. And finally, I think we need a few more thoughts about what are the other threats and opportunities for increasing trade linkages in relation to rice. I'm talking about political economy, consumer preferences, technological progress, and climate change. I'm most familiar with Philippines. So not only is India having this kind of on-off policy, where because of this, what happened in one grain spilled over to policies in other grains that actually caused distress in the global rice market, and a lot of policy angst in the Philippine government, now leading to the current import suspension. So that kind of, shall we say, capricious policy, probably pursued for whatever food security reasons by Indian government, has also backlash on the other countries, and has led to the current policy stance where we actually have prohibited all kinds of imports, including imports from India, at least temporarily. Now we are rolling out a variable tariff starting January, and actually there's a lot of looseness and vagueness in the actual implementation of the new executive order on the variable import levy. So stay tuned to find out how it will shape up. But if you listen to the latest DA pronouncements, they'd like to lift the tariff back up to 35%, and they would like to reverse effectively the tarification and reinstitute a level of QR, and also reinstitute the role of the National Food Authority as the state trading enterprise authorized to import. So in effect, the second biggest development, which is the Philippines being a rice importer, the world's biggest rice importer, stands a very real chance of being reversed. No, so I'm wondering whether that has implications for future trade linkages. By the way, no, it's not just that the Philippines became the second largest rice importer. There was also one of the single biggest sustained drops in the retail price of rice in the Philippines in the aftermath of that reform. So much so that even during the global pandemic, where there was supply disruptions left and right, the Philippines rice prices were stable and even declining throughout, and even throughout Ukrainian invasion, fertilizer price increases, it still kept either dropping or stable until the India's export restrictions started causing the spike in the world rice market. But anyway, that has been reversed. But the opposite happened. and now we are instituting a import ban. So these are the various oscillations and drama related to the political economy. Of course, consumer preferences. I think Sam has already discussed consumer preferences. Since Philippines is almost towards an upper middle income status, the quality of rice is also part of the deal of being able to import. Incidentally, even this high quality rice is available at $350 to $370, right, from Vietnam. And now, as you are describing, Sam, even lower prices are available for equal or even better quality rice from a state in India. So that was really a good opportunity for consumers in the Philippines. Technological progress is also increasingly there's a shift to new varieties and precision farming. IFPRI is one of the sources of these. Of course, in Philippines and various NARs throughout Southeast Asia, they're also rolling out new technologies. And finally, the threat of climate change. So I know this probably is not a factor in the next 1 year or 2 years, unless there happens to be an El Nino. La Nina prospects are not that serious, at least the last time the projections I checked. But in the medium to long term, this is a serious concern, right? So affecting not of course the major export sources, as Sam has pointed out, Vietnam and Thailand, their production is stagnant. In fact, there's a threat that it could even decline because of what's going to possibly happen to Mekong River Delta and other river delta systems in mainland Southeast Asia. And even India is not also spared from this, because the vast Indo-Gangetic Plains river systems, they also face various threats, including glacial melt, introducing large volatility in precipitation, and so on. All of these attendant changes that could conceivably dramatically change the face or the landscape of rice production in the decade or so hence. So perhaps if these points could be further elaborated, I'm sure it would be greatly appreciated by the audience. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Briones. So I'll give time for Dr. Sam to clarify and then answer some of the issues raised by Dr. Briones. Just briefly, because we're running.
I see a lot of questions there, but I think I don't disagree with what Briones said there. I am just responding to the situation right now, given the current policy setting there. And you said why Telangana only? Because rice production growing many other states also. Telangana rice is more suitable to Southeast Asia. Telangana grows this long grain rice. Long grain rice is not consumed in India. This IR64 MTU 1010, there is no demand for that rice in India. It's mostly grown for export purpose, and it's normally exported as parabolic rice to South Africa and Nigeria, some other country. But this rice can be also consumed by the Southeast Asia if the quality is good, because of the cooking quality of this thing there. So it's not Telangana suits for Southeast Asia market. Other states suiting for other regions, Africa, South Africa, because they don't grow a lot of long grain rice. And Telangana, this long grain rice, Telangana is also one of the states in India where half of its crops in the dry season. India, 85% of the crop is in the Kharif, in the wet season, rainy season. Only 15% in the dry season, which is good. So that we are utilizing the monsoon water quite a bit. But Telangana is one of the states where half of its crop in the Rabi season, which is bad, which is definitely bad, because they're using a lot of groundwater, and groundwater depletion is an issue in the state. But thing is, anything grown in the Rabi is the quality of the paddy is very good. The milled rice quality is very good if it's a Rabi crop there, which also suits Southeast Asia, particularly Filipinos market, where when you mill those Rabi rice there, the broken is less. You can make it more silky without having large proportion of broken and chalky rice there, which is a big problem with the demand of the Filipinos. Why India has not been able to meet? It's not because of the freight charges. Freight charges from India to Philippines is $10 per ton, which is, definitely Vietnam is cheaper. Vietnam also can send in smaller vessel than India. It's very closer and very quickly they can send it. But I don't think the major region prohibition is the freight rate. It's mostly the quality parameters. Indian millers cannot meet the quality of rice you are used to it now, which is DT8. It's a very basic, it's a designer rice, I call it. It took us 6 months to make these millers to mill this type of rice needed by the Philippines there. But so that's one of the things there. And as you said, there's a lot of variable there in terms of the Philippines. The variable levy is coming into picture, how it's going to work. And G2G basis, the Telangana Civil Supply is the government-owned agency. So it's owned by it's a government control who is in charge of procuring rice from farmers. Okay. So they are in charge. And the Philippine side, it is the government control planters producting PPI, which used to be the chemical company. Now it's kind of controlled by the government. you know so it's basically government backed, I would say. So it's not a G2G is doing. I think government backed by both sides. PPI bought it because the backing of the DA there, and Telangana Corporation is owned by the government, so it's a backing of both the government there. That gives the assurance to both parties that the quality can be maintained. Major issues in Indian rice in the Philippines market is a quality concern. And nobody still now, despite all the efforts of the traders from India after this Telangana rise, not a single trader from India have been successful in sending any rice to Philippines so far. So P2P rice has been zero, despite the G2G happening. So there is a trust building needs to take place in the Philippines market regarding the quality of the Indian rice there. I think I agree with you, all your long-term uncertainty, climate change, all these other things there. But I would like to mention one more thing. Remember, I told India consumed 90 million ton, 45 million ton through this free rice program. 3,000 rupees I told, 0 to 3,000, and 45 million ton to open market. Indian government have been mulling, actually debating whether to convert those rice into cash transfer. If that happens, that 45 million ton is going to shrink to 30 million, 20 million ton, because people will diversify. Now they're consuming because they're getting this free rice. Once they get the cash, they have the option of consuming something else. So we are not going to see the supply surge, but we will see a demand surge. That means there will be more surplus, for India there. But I don't know when that cash transfer may or may not happen. If it happens, then there's more surplus to the market there. Anyway, I think I'll stop here unless any other specific question anybody has.
Okay, thank you, Sam. We have three questions here, but due to limited time, we'd like to address this very quickly. So the first question is, how can we justify the exporting water along with rice? How to sustain this aspect?
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is an old question. I think there is nothing new in this question there. We know we need a lot of rice. We are not exporting rice. We are not exporting water. We are exporting rice. And I think the whole point is that you can criticize whole thing that how can you export rice in the form of water in the form of rice there. But I think remember that the rice is grown in India 85% in the monsoon season. I think growing rabi rice probably is a big issue in terms of the dipping into the groundwater there. As long as you are utilizing a lot of monsoon water, surface water to grow rice, it's fine. And also our efforts should be minimize the water usage there. All these 5,000 liter per water is complete garbage. I don't think there is a truth there. So rice can be grown in lot less water. And if you're using surface water, monsoon water, there is nothing wrong in that. In the monsoon, there is hardly anything can be grown in India. Mostly in the eastern part of the country, central part of the country, too much rainfall there. Rice is the only crop that can survive in the monsoon. I think it is wrong for India to start growing a lot of rabi rice, which is dry season. As long as they keep it mostly monsoon driven, it's okay. The irrigation is mostly backup. Despite Telangana doing all these things, the water table is increasing. Water table in Telangana now increasing because of the efforts they have taken so far. So I think that is kind of a too harsh question in that water, in the form of rice there. And the other one is Okay,
How can India and its rice exporters navigate through import restrictions that the Southeast Asian markets had been imposing?
yeah, I think I don't think Southeast Asian market was one of the open market there. The Philippines had tarification there. They have been doing private trading, mostly private importers buying from the private players there. Indonesia and the Malaysia mostly state trading there. But the rice is always been governed, controlled by the government. There's a government intervention which always be there. I don't expect any rice free trade anytime in my lifetime. I think we are going into more protectionism. If you look at a lot of things happening around the world there. So I look at it still, despite all these restriction Southeast Asia country has, same thing also South Asia is the other partner. So rice trade happens in this environment. That is something you have to maneuver there. What's the third question?
Yeah, there's another question, but I would like to answer for you to answer from Mishra. Dr. Ma, you mentioned the dramatic increase in number of bore wells in Telangana from 2014 to 2024. Could you
Yeah,
elaborate
yeah.
a bit on what intervention or policy change led to the increase?
Yeah. Well, I think the number of borewells increase is driven by definitely farmers would like to have irrigation backup there. So when you have the bonus rice, you have MSP on rice, then the government announces bonus there. Then a lot of subsidies for the borewell and other irrigation infrastructure. Those are the things driving in terms of the irrigation number of borewells, other things. It is not only Telangana; it's happening all over the country there. The number of borewells increasing all over the place. The deep well, borewell, they're increasing. So the irrigation infrastructure is increasing, driven by policy, MSP, annual bonus, or also the subsidy there. The government also provide subsidy to buying the borewell and tube wells, other things there. So those are the things driving the irrigation infrastructure in the country there. Anything else?
Yeah, just one last from Opreti. So, have there
Hmm?
also been any notable non-tariff barriers that might also add to the reason behind lesser rice exports to the Southeast Asia by India, or any strict NTMs India faces difficulty to abide by?
Well, the non-tariff barriers, as I said, rice is always been traded in this environment there. You will never find a free trade of rice there. And every country, rice is a food security crops. They would like to protect their own domestic production. They would like to ensure farmers get the decent price there. So all these things factor into the policy decision in the country. Philippines was, importing rice through a tarification there for nearly 5 6 years. Very recently, they have put this ban there, but that's to protect their own farmers there. So I think this is very common. These non-tariff measures country imposes, be it India, Vietnam, any other countries there. So I don't think anything. We basically have to maneuver through this thing, as I said. The Indian traders will have to find the window. Right now, Philippines will be opening up for 300,000 tons in January. Then they might close again. So Indian traders are trying to get a market share in this environment, 300,000 metric tons of allocated amount. So I expect these non-tariff measures to increase. We had a time where the non-tariff measures went down, but I think we are entering into environment where the non-tariff will increase again, given the geopolitical situation, war happening. So country will be a lot more apprehensive about not producing enough and depending on the foreign, particularly food security crop like rice, which is too much sensitive there. So expect the non-tariff measures to increase in the going forward, at least in the foreseeable future.
Yeah, we still have several questions, but I think we have limited time. So I let you send you the question, and then maybe we can send the answer to them.
We
Or you
have
want-
participants who have raised their hands and also want to say something. And
Hmm.
also, Devesh, you can go ahead and speak. I have unmuted.
Who's that?
Devesh. Just a second.
Okay. Okay. Devesh.
Oh, no, sorry. Thank you. This is, really informative actually, and with both the presentation and the discussion, very informative. And So I'm speaking like, coming totally from a trade economics perspective. And so, uh, so, so Dr. Ponti, this is now trade always takes place through global value chain. And you saw that, it will get some quality rice will go from India to Vietnam, then they will mill it in a certain way, then and then they will get exported to Philippines. So, in terms of the strategy, so this is because when you get into a kind of a global value chain, then there is always the question of participation as well as positioning, that where do you locate? So, why is Telangana or any other exporter for that matter not locating in that part of the value chain? So instead of, we have this surplus rice, but what has been you have done some bit of it to get them ready to export, the millers producing a quality of rice, but still, there are rice going from India to Vietnam, and then there is value addition, or there is transformation, and then it goes to Philippines. So why doesn't, and this is the story like you get in cotton, for
Yeah,
instance.
yeah.
Why is it not happening that, why isn't Telangana becomes that power? And you said that, I mean, I had one question, but then you probably answered that I thought that if you look at the trade cost, does they really give it? But your point is that it's not the trade cost. It's still might be a little lower in Vietnam to Philippines, but it's not the trade cost is not the main factor here.
No.
So why doesn't really Telangana really develop the milling sector to at a scale that it can just position itself in the global value chain where the greatest I mean it's a bit like a smile curve issue in the global value chain. So
Yeah.
that's what I want to know, and this could be a prescription for not only for other states in India but other places, that how do you really, where do you position? So
Yeah.
this is something that I really wanted to know. And then one other question is just last bit, and because I know that we don't have time, is this so how do you really strategize? Because here is a variety that you are only producing for export to certain market. And the point is that, what will be the strategy that, you produce this variety of rice, and uh, when you need a reasonable assurance in whenever you go on the extensive margin, you really need a bit of an assurance of, what would be the market. And so how can you rely on just saying that, okay, we go to this quality of rice, but this importing market is also pretty uncertain, and as well as your exporting market is as well as India's policy. And so this is what we know. I mean, these things take place at the very variety level. So how do we really think about the production choices, which are basically variety choices? And so that's what I wanted to, just
Yeah.
pick your brains. I mean, some other questions I'll just send you by mail.
Sure, sure. Thank you, Deves. I think the Vietnam importing from India, it's mostly going from the Calcutta port to Vietnam there, which is closer than the Kakinada port there. And the Vietnam, they're buying this Swarna raw rice, which is a medium grain rice from India. They're using that one not for value addition. They're using for noodles there, for producing noodles there, rice noodles, and that opens up their own rice, high quality rice for export purpose. So they're using low quality rice to do their domestic value additions or processing, and that makes their domestic rice available for export there. But they are doing value addition for Cambodia, Cambodian paddy coming there, getting milled. The Vietnam meals are probably the best in the world right now. In terms of the same paddy, they can produce lot more higher quality than Indian meal owners there, because their focus is so commercial. When we are doing this Telangana deal there, and the millers were miserably failing to produce the quality of rice Philippines require. So we're basically looking at Vietnam. Vietnam, in terms of the policing, they don't do policing in one go. They do policing in several notches. So it's slow pressure on the rice, so that the broken percentage is not high. So when we are doing this Telangana rice for Philippines market, farmers, the millers are complaining 30% broken, 30% chalky. We are only getting 30% rice which is suitable for the market. We cannot survive in this environment there because they are trying to get the silkiness in one go. Whereas Vietnam, they have several things they do slow pressure in terms of reducing the broken percentage to get the required quality there. So that's major difference in terms of the value chain in India and Vietnam. Vietnam value chain is geared towards this high quality rice, and Indian value chain is geared toward this low quality discounted rice. So you have to change that mindset of the Indian millers. As you said, they can do it, but there is a assured they need to know they will get higher price for the product there. So that is a big thing. That's the reason we are developing this exclusive supply zone there. And the rest, we are not changing the variety. This variety is already grown in India. This IR64 is already a preferred variety for Telangana farmers, at least. It is extended with Rabi crop is mostly IR64. They grow it because it's high yielding there in the state there. So the farmer prefer to grow the IR64. But most of the IR64 now goes as paraboiled rice, exported to Nigeria, South Africa, and some of these African countries. And they get low price. What we are trying to do, if you can utilize those IR64, divert it from paraboiled to raw, and mill it for Southeast Asian market, you can get $40-50 higher than what you are getting, maybe more than that, $100 higher than what you are getting in parabolic rice. The millers are geared towards parabolic rice because the broken percent is less, so they have less risky in terms of using the IR64 to parabolic rather than the raw milled rice. And the milled rice, the demand is only limited to specific Southeast Asian countries there. If they cannot produce that quality, they cannot sell it. So that is one thing apprehensions millers have. So when you have these exclusive supplies, zones we are developing from seed to sip, we have to give some sort of assurance to the farmers that if you grow this and the whole supply chain, that you will get higher than what the farmers are getting as MSP. So the government backup has to be there. That in worst case we will give you the MSP there. You will not get the lows than MSP. So we need to see how this supply chain will work. Other than that, if that doesn't happen, then the private sector has to completely take initiative to produce for the Philippines market, and which is probably very unlikely, given the mistrust between Filipino importers and Indian traders. There is no trust from Philippine side on Indian rice there. So that's probably the bigger things we are trying to address, is that develop the trust factor.
So we have a very fruitful discussion, but unfortunately we have a limited time. So I think I need to close this webinar, and just want to highlight some of the key takeaways from this webinar. It was highlighted by Dr. Sam that the Southeast Asia faces an uncertainty in terms of their growing supply, and it increases the dependence of countries on Philippines, Indonesia, and Malaysia. And it was highlighted that there's a strong complementarity between the Indian surplus and the Southeast Asian import needs, like the one that I've mentioned, the IR64 and MTU 1010 1010, and the Telangana and Philippine government demonstrate a viable model in terms of the G2G arrangement that can catalyze the private sector trade relationship. But as mentioned by Dr. Ruel, we should be aware of the uncertainties in terms of the production landscape, the policies, and also the logistics. And so with that, we hope that today's discussions contribute meaningfully to the ongoing policy conversation on regional trade cooperation, food security, and agri-food systems transformation. So on behalf of IFPRI and CIRCA, I would like to thank Dr. Mohanty, Dr. Briones, and all our participants for their valuable contribution. So thank you so much, and we look forward to your continued engagement in the NEPA webinar series.
Thank you.
So that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.